Welcome back to the show. My name's Dan. This is Exploder. Let's get right into the topic. In professional wrestling, there's a lot of good, there's a little bit of bad, there's a whole lot of in between, and in all the things you talk about professional wrestling, there's a lot of good. A lot of things you remember that are fondly, and they're good ideas and things that work, things that simply just work. But then again, there's also stuff that just doesn't work. Things that have been tried time and time and time again in professional wrestling, and for some reason, just doesn't work. So I've taken it upon myself, because it's my podcast and I feel like it, so deal with it, people, to compile a little list, just a small list, of things that I think we can all agree as wrestling fans, as wrestling promoters, as wrestlers, as referees, of anyone at all, just agree that maybe we shouldn't. Here's things we should not do. I'm calling this episode, Don't Do That. Now, of course, I'm not saying this is somebody who's ran the WWF, WB, ECW, WCW, AEW, Alphabet Soup, whatever you want to do. I'm not one of those guys. I'm never going to work for AEW or New Japan. I'm certainly not going to work for WB. Not out of choice, mind you. I'm just, not good enough. Point is, I'm not saying this is somebody in an authority. I'm just saying it as a fan, a wrestling fan of over 20 years, who's seen it all. I wouldn't say seen it all, but I've seen a bunch. And everything I mentioned today, I've seen numerous times, and every time it just doesn't work. So that's why I've decided that I'm going to come out here and say, here's an idea. Don't do these things, because you've tried it numerous times. And I'm talking about major league stuff. I'm not talking about Podunk Championship Wrestling in Paducah. That'd be a heck of a name for a promotion, wouldn't it? Podunk Championship Wrestling. Anyway, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about WWF, WCW, ECW. I'm sure Japan's tried some crazy things. I mean, heck, we've all seen DDT. But that's what we're talking about, is stuff that's happened in the mainstream that has been done numerous times, but just doesn't work. So with that in mind, here's a couple topics, a couple ideas that I would just say, quite frankly, just don't do that anymore. 1, don't new to anything. Now, new, in theory, sounds like a good idea. Something's new, improved, better. Oh, that's a great idea. Except when it comes to marketing. In marketing, new implies that something is now better. The problem is when you put new attached to something that's already existed, it doesn't quite work, because all it does is remind people of the other thing that existed before that was cool, and how this is not that. New Coke. Remember that? Of course you don't. Point is, New Coke was this new idea, it's this new formulation, and what people liked, they just liked Coke better. They just remembered how much they really liked regular Coke. Coke Classic. You ever drank some New Coke lately? No, you haven't. Point is, whenever you say new something, it just reminds people of the other thing that used to be that actually is pretty cool. You, if nothing else, you remind them that they like the original thing, and that translates into wrestling. Who could forget the 90s with the New Rockers, Marty Jannetty and Leif Cassidy, in another tag team where Marty Jannetty was the Marty Jannetty. Irony. The New Blackjacks, Blackjack Wyndham and Blackjack Bradshaw. Again, it did a great thing for Bradshaw's career, leaving that behind and moving on and doing other things and becoming a J.R. Ewing knockoff, but it didn't do a lot for Barry Windham, and the New Blackjacks was just not a good idea. It reminded people of a tag team that, quite frankly, very few in the audience remembered from the 60s. And the Blackjacks were awesome, but the New Blackjacks? The New Midnight Express, Bombastic Bob, Bodacious Bart, might as well just had Job Squad written on the t-shirts. I mean, Bob Holly eventually would, but I mean, really, adding new to something doesn't do any good. They're the new anything, and I don't care how good it is. I don't care how good the tag team was. If you say the New Rock and Roll Express, or the New Legion of Doom, or the New Demolition, I don't care. It's not going to be better. It's not going to be as good. Honestly, it's going to be worse, because it's the old axiom, you can be better than, worse than, or different than. And the reality is, the minute you say new something, New Midnight Express, all you're reminding people of is the original Midnight Express, if they remembered it all, and how this is never going to stand up to that. And honestly, it's going to be worse. So new anything, just don't do it. This was the topic that inspired me to do this episode, to do this topic right here. One thing I am amazed, and the more I've done research in this, I've realized how often it's been done. Don't do a pregnancy angle, okay? Here's why. Because there's a basic idea of an angle. Again, this is not that I'm I'm not Pat Patterson or Bruce Pritchard or Vince McMahon or any of those guys. I'm not a guy who has 30 years of writing experience. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this just as a fan, only as a fan. The thing about angles need a payoff. Every angle needs a payoff. It needs a final moment where it pays off, to where whatever you've been going through, it makes sense in the end. Do you know the payoff of pregnancy? Giving birth to a human being. That's it. If you take pregnancy and lay it out the same way, the end result, the payoff of a pregnancy, of someone being pregnant, is to give birth to a child. And since you won't see that on Monday night, The minute you announce a pregnancy on a wrestling program, you literally write yourself into a corner and you have nowhere to go. So if you announce a pregnancy angle, it's been done numerous times. When I watched it, I'm amazed at how many times it's actually been done. You have about 6 to 8 weeks to either A, have a non-pregnant person begin to show their non-pregnant stomach, or B, find an excuse for why the pregnancy ended. And I'll get to that part. This has been done 5 times in modern wrestling that I can think of off the top of my head. Once in ECW, once in WCW, and 3 times in the WWE. Think of that. The thing I'm just right now saying don't do, because you can't go anywhere, there's nowhere to go, there's no payoff. The payoff is either something completely unbelievable, and I'll get to that, or giving birth. And again, even during the Attitude Era, there were some standards. They're not showing placenta on live TV. Not gonna happen, folks. Sorry. And thank God for that. The first one in the WWF was when Terry Runnels was supposedly pregnant again and had a miscarriage because Russo. Then they sort of covered it by being revealed she was never pregnant to begin with. So it was a miscarriage angle that was covered by someone faking a pregnancy to trap a man. Classy. Then there was the second one, which I can't even explain this one. The second one was legendary grappler and dinosaur test pilot Mae Young getting pregnant by Mark Henry of all people, that actually ended up with a birth of a hand. It was the Attitude Era, people. This is some of the stuff we dealt with. They also cut off a guy's penis with a samurai sword, so anything could happen. Then there's one with Lita after the Attitude Era, with Lita was pregnant with Kane's demon seed. Still don't like that term. Then Snitsky showed up and caused a miscarriage, which made Kane a babyface somehow. Wrestling's weird. ECW did a brief one where Raven's valet Beulah revealed she was pregnant not by Raven, but by his sworn enemy, Tommy Dreamer. This was shortly revealed to be a lie. Turns out Beulah wasn't pregnant. She was a lesbian with Kimono Wanalea, which wasn't a deal breaker for Tommy Dreamer. Again, this was ECW, so at this point, it was on the table. But in all of them, probably the most interesting that doesn't involve the birth of an actual rubber hand, one of the most interesting ones they did was in WCW. At New Blood Rising, August of 2000, the pay-per-view named after a group that died a month prior, Miss Hancock faced Living Blow-Up Doll, Major Guns, in an ROTC match. Now, ROTC in this case stood for Rip Off the Camouflage. One guess who came up with that gem? His name's Russo. That's the answer. During the match, which was just terrible action between 2 barely trained women that soon turned into a mud wrestling, Miss Hancock held her stomach and was taken out a stretcher while covered head to toe in mud. The announcers played it off with their serious voices, using Hancock's real name, Stacy Keebler, and pretending this was a shoot, bro. The next night on Nitro, Keebler would announce to boyfriend David Flair that she was pregnant. Now, the long-term plan here was for them to get married and it to come out later that the baby's father wasn't David Flair, it was Ric Flair. Ick. But then it was just dropped. They took Keebler off TV, and when she came back with a bassinet, a baby carriage, whatever you want to call it, and she said something about seeing her baby, and then inside the carriage, instead of a baby like you were expecting, was just pictures of Shawn Stasiak. So their solution to having someone who isn't pregnant be pregnant on TV, the payoff was just ignore that it happened. There's no baby, no pregnancy. Done. Because it was WCW. Say what you want about WWF and chopping people's members off with a samurai sword or giving birth to a hand. I mean, they followed through with the hand part, for crying out loud. This was just like, no, oh yeah, that didn't happen. Wiping your memories. Just don't do it. Like I said, there's no payoff. This is 5 times in modern wrestling history, again, by major companies where they did this. There's no payoff. There's no good payoff. And you don't have to do it. That's the thing. The thing about those is you don't have to do it. No one's forcing anyone to write a pregnancy angle. No one's forcing anybody to do something. Oh, they're pregnant. You don't have to do it. It's like if you do a promo where you threaten to kill somebody. If you threaten to kill someone and you go to the ring at the pay-per-view or whatever and you do anything short of killing them, then you're not a man of your word. And if you do kill them, then you're a murderer. There's no winners there. So don't threaten to kill people. It's just that easy. Don't write an angle where the expected payoff cannot be paid off. Don't say, I'm going to kill someone, because you logically can't. In a wrestling ring, I don't care. No one can intentionally kill somebody. Don't write an angle that requires the end to be a live person coming out of another live person. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make any sense to do that. Another one I want to talk about, because again, I've been watching WCW in 2000 because I'm a glutton for punishment. And the one thing I want to say here is and this is something that should have been told to Vince Russo around 1995, and then just beaten into his head every single week, but it wasn't, because the ratings were good, and nobody cared until like, later, well, that doesn't make any sense. Don't write an angle if you don't know how to end it. Now, I understand you have to adapt week to week. You have to feel it out. You have to do, you have to change on the fly sometimes. Guys get injured. How you do that? You got to feel the audience. I get that. I don't mean that. What I mean is don't pull a Russo and do something without knowing how you're going to end it or where you're going. A good example of this, while I could go through a lot of these, and there's a lot of ones, the one example I want to go back to is TNA, where logic goes to die and crowds simply don't go. Around 2005, 2006, I think it was around 2005, TNA would do an angle where Robert Roode was abusing his assistant, Tracy Brooks, who was being defended by Frankie Kazarian. Now, the angle like this, again, if you've ever watched wrestling, logically, the angle would be Brooks would eventually turn on Roode and align with Kazarian. Easy, right? Makes sense. You do it week to week, and then finally you set up the big match. You have it look like Roode has the advantage, have Brooks turn on him, she goes with Kazarian. Logic. That's basic storytelling. It makes sense. Of course, this is TNA, so, So you know what they did for weeks and weeks, and they built this up, and they built this up. And then, after weeks and weeks of this angle, you know what TNA did? They just pulled him off TV. I don't know why. They just did. They pulled him off TV and forgot about the angle. So the next time you saw Robert Roode, the next time you saw Tracy Brooks, the next time you saw Kazarian, they were just doing other things, and no one mentioned that part of the angle. Why? And here's why. Do you know why? And this is the story that's going around. Actually, at this time, I believe it. You know why? Because they didn't know how to end it. At the time, apparently, they were doing a similar angle. I can't remember with who. If somebody knows this, let me know. But they were doing a similar angle. I think it was with Jacqueline Moore and I want to say James Storm or something like that. Like, there was an angle like that. It was very similar somewhere in the card, around the mid-card. And it was really similar with a valet or a manager or whatever. So they didn't want to do it similar. And they didn't want to put Brooks with Kazarian, despite the fact that they were using weeks and weeks of television building an angle that would logically end with Brooks being with Kazarian. It just makes sense, right? It just makes, that's where they're going, and they spend all this time and they go, yeah, they do like 5-6 weeks of it and then go, well, we don't know where we're going. And one of the logical answer is not where we want to go. Let's just pull them off TV and forget about it. It's one thing if you're doing an angle for a week and you change your mind, or you're doing video packages for somebody and then you change your mind. It's one thing to do it. It's another thing to spend weeks and weeks and weeks. And by this point, TNA's on national television, by the way. They're on Spike by this point. When you're on national television and you're spending weeks and weeks, I don't care if it is just the mid card. You're spending weeks on an angle and then you just pull it off because you don't know how to end it. You don't know, and where it logically would go, you don't want to do that. Well, you should have thought of that when you first started the angle, you idiots. Okay? So I don't know who's responsible for that, and I'm not just going to go to the easy right here and just blame, I'm going to sit here and blame Russo. It's easy. It's easy to do, but I'm not going to do that. I don't know who was in charge of that. I have a couple ideas. Again, it probably starts with Russo, but I can't say for sure. I wasn't there. I'm not going to pretend like I was. But if you don't know how to end an angle, don't start it. If you're going to start something and you're going to do it, know where you're going. And even if where you're going isn't necessarily the logical place, which is sort of stupid or whatever, have an ending. Have a beginning, have an ending, and you can fill out the middle when you need to. But just doing something and not know where you're going with it, that's stupid. And that's stupid for a TV show, and that's stupid for wrestling, and that's stupid for a book. I don't care what it is. It's stupid. Don't do it. Another thing I want to talk about is just don't make things too complicated. Pro wrestling, at its base, is a very simple idea. A man and a man, or a woman and a woman, or two, a group, a mix of two, a faction versus a faction, a tag team versus a tag team, a 6-man, whatever. Simple. A simple match, a simple tag match, a simple cage match. There are things, you know the rules, you know how they're going, you know the way they're trying to go. Easy. Every time someone's trying to complicate that, every time someone's trying to reinvent the wheel, it has not worked out. The AWA Tag Team Challenge Series, remember that? The Team Challenge Series, the waning days, the dying days of AWA. The reason people didn't like it because it was too complicated. You had point systems and this and that, and you got to win for this, and you got 3 points for that. WCW did the same thing. They did the same thing with this. I don't remember what it was. It was some kind of tournament, and it was that you got 3 points for a pinfall and 2 for something and 5 for a submission. I don't remember exactly, but it was something to that effect. It was like you got points depending on this. So if this guy wins with a pinfall, then his team will be ahead. And it's just too complicated. And when you make it too complicated, people their eyes gloss over. They go, and they don't care anymore. Okay? So that's the thing. Probably the worst version of this is the King of the Mountain. Now, let's real quick understand the rules of the King of the Mountain. The King of the Mountain it's a reverse ladder match. First of all, right away, stupid. And so you had to grab the belt, bring it up the ladder and hang it on a hook. So instead of pulling it down from the ladder, you got to put it up there. The only people eligible to put it up there is someone who's already gotten a pinfall. So you get a pinfall, you're eligible to grab the belt and walk up the ladder and put it up there. But the person that's pinned goes into a penalty box for, I want to say like 3 minutes or something like that. I don't remember. So they go into a penalty box. So the person in the penalty box got pinned. The person who gets the pin is now eligible to grab the title and go up the ladder and hang it up there. Now, that only seems like a couple rules, but when you watch it, especially when there's 5 or 6 people in the match, it complicates things so much because you're seeing guys do a reverse ladder match, which is kind of stupid to begin with. And then you go, well, is he eligible? So their announcers have to constantly remind you who can win. None of the 5 people that are in the match, because at the time, you know, if you get a pinfall, then at the time, if Jeff Jarrett gets the first pinfall, Jeff Jarrett's the only one who could win. Theoretically, during that time, unless someone else gets a pinfall, Jeff Jarrett's the only one who's allowed to win this match right now. And in practice, the King of the Mountain match was just too complicated because it added these little things. Again, it should be simple. Make it a ladder match. If you already got a ladder, you already got a belt, you already got a hook, make it a ladder match. Simple. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. So that's the thing with wrestling. And again, sometimes WWE still does this, and sometimes these guys with these indie feds and even AEW or somebody like that, they'll come up with something like, oh, it's different, so let's try this. And you're like, yeah, but when you make it too complicated, whether it's different or not, it doesn't make it entertaining. It's not entertaining anymore. If I have to take notes on what the rules are while I'm watching at home, you've made it too complicated, dude. I don't want to have a degree in statistics to understand who's supposed to win a freaking wrestling match. It doesn't work that way. Stop it. Another one I want to talk about is something I noticed a lot about during... I know I pick on Vince Russo a lot. I know I do. But to be fair, he's done a lot to deserve it. I don't know him personally. I don't know how he is as a person. He seems like a loudmouth, so-and-so. But as far as a writer, I just don't respect some of the stuff he's done. I like the idea that he could write XYZ and Vince McMahon can go, that's a good idea, and that's garbage, and let's never do that. But as far as whenever you let the guy sort of... Some of his ideas are just stupid, and they were some of the best stuff that came out of the Attitude Era of WWF, and some of the worst stuff of the Attitude Era and WCW. Both came from the same guy, if you think about it. One of the biggest mistakes that Vince Russo made was when he started doing these work-shoot type things. It's one thing when you're doing an interview, and you're doing a Gold Dust interview. I've talked about Gold Dust in a previous episode. Check that out on Podbean, Stitcher, we're on Facebook, whatever. I did that on Gold Dust, the career of Gold Dust. It's one thing when you're doing a interview when you're sort of work shoot. You're talking about stuff that people know behind the scenes, as far as, you know, when Gold Dust talked about how he was Dustin Rhodes and his father, he had a relationship with his father at the time and all these things. It's one thing to do that, and that's cool. And that's sort of that blurring that line is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's another thing when you take that and you put it against wrestling and you juxtapose something that's going on in wrestling and you juxtapose it against something else and go, no, this is real. Yeah, all that other fake crap, but this is real. When you understand that when people are watching a wrestling show, they are temporarily, and it's an old expression, but it's true, suspending their disbelief. You go into it knowing, honestly, week to week right now with Shane McMahon and Kevin Owens, you know they're working together. Logically, just sitting at home thinking, you know they're working together. They don't really hate each other, but everything you go into it knowing it's fiction, but you want to leave in that fictional world, and you want to see within that fictional realm how it makes sense. Because if you think, okay, if these two are really fighting, of course it would make sense to do this. Of course the power-hungry so-and-so would cut the mic of the guy who was telling him off. Of course this is, you know? Of course, you know, and again, there are things you accept because you know it's not really happening. You know Steve Austin wasn't really beating up his boss on a weekly basis and still collecting a paycheck. Of course he wasn't. But you have to make something realistic enough. But in the middle of that, don't juxtapose that. Don't put up something else and then tell everyone, no. Yeah, that stuff, but this is the real. This is the real thing. The first example of this, again, a Russo creation for dumb reasons by a dumb person, is Brawl for All. Brawl for All was a series of, I don't have to explain to you, you're a wrestling fan, you know what Brawl for All. If you watched wrestling even back during the Attitude Era, you know. Brawl for All was boxing and whatever the hell. And it was put, instead of its own event, instead of a tough man contest, which is basically what it was, they put it in the middle of an actual Raw. So what they were saying was, okay, The Undertaker and Mankind are over here, and they're doing their thing, but this is Brawl for All. This is real. These are real boxers. This is a real fight. Yeah, Steve Austin, but this is a real fight. So you're telling people, indirectly, you're telling them, don't believe the rest of our program. Don't believe everything else you're seeing. Yeah, that's fiction, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? This is the real fight. Godfather versus, Bradshaw. That's a real fight. Steve Austin versus The Rock, who cares? But this is real. Well, that's sort of a way to insult your audience. And so it basically makes them feel, lied to, I guess, because you're telling them to their face, oh, you thought that other stuff was real? Whatever. No. This is the real fight, which is bull. And he would ramp this up. He would ramp this up even worse in WCW. And again, this is August of 2000, the New Blood Rising pay-per-view. Goldberg, Kevin Nash, and Scott Steiner were in a three-way match. Now, a three-way match in a wrestling thing, and they actually built it up pretty well for these three not liking each other. But the idea was that the winner would get a world title shot against the winner of Jeff Jarrett versus Booker T. All right, so that's basic that's wrestling. That's basic wrestling. Okay, that makes sense. The problem with this is the way they built it up was like, oh, they don't like each other. But then they started throwing in these little sort of these inside jabs, like, well, I don't know how things are gonna go. I don't know how things are supposed to go, but I'm gonna walk out the winner. And you'd hear that and you go, even when I was, about 15, 16 years old at this time, even then I'm like, what do they mean by that? Because it's not like, okay, Steve Austin goes into a WrestleMania and says, I'm gonna beat The Rock. I'm going to win, I'm going to be a better performer, I'm going to be a better wrestler, and I'm going to beat The Rock. That makes sense. It's another thing when someone goes, well, I don't care what the script calls for, I'm going to win. And then immediately you start going, well, so they're admitting that this is scripted. They're admitting that and then they start bringing Vince Russo into it. Well, I don't care what Vince Russo wants, I'm going to get the title shot. So what does Vince Russo have to do with it? There's three guys in the ring. As a wrestler, if there's three guys in the ring, what does Vince Russo have to do with it? Well, Vince Russo is booking the match. He books who the winner's supposed to be. So then you're like, well, then they're sort of mixing this. It's a wrestling match where you're supposed to believe they're real, but then at the same time, that Russo's involved, so there's a script and they're working together. And then there's the one where Goldberg didn't go up for the powerbomb, which Scott Hudson mentioned a couple times. I'm sure at the behest of WCW management who told him this, but then there's like, what do you mean go up for the powerbomb? I mean, these three guys are in the realm of wrestling, suspend your disbelief, are fighting each other. Why would Goldberg volunteer to go up for the powerbomb? Okay, and then he just pushed Nash off and left the ring. And then he's confronted by Vince Russo, who is at that time not associated with any of those three men. He's not managing any of them, but he is the booker. He's the head writer. So then he tells Goldberg to get back in the ring, and Goldberg says some things that WCW probably didn't want him to say, and then he left. And then the next night, Russo's in the ring with Tank Abbott, and he threatens to fire Goldberg, and then he says that their lawyer won't allow them to, and so he's gonna fight him and all these things. And it was this thing, like this mixture of, okay, everything you're about to see tonight, you're gonna see, this match and that match and this guy, okay, whatever, that's fake. This is real. This segment's real. The Goldberg versus Tank Abbott thing, that's a real fight, and I'm the real boss. And again, when you put it next to each other, it's like, so you're telling the audience that the rest of the show is fake. That's a really great plan. It's a great plan to make them invested in something, to say, yeah, well, Mike Awesome versus Vampiro or anything else, oh, those are fake. But Goldberg and Tank Abbott, that's real. Vince Russo yelling at Goldberg and threatening to fire him, this is a real segment. Well, okay, if that's a real segment, then what is everything else by extension? See, when you do that, all you do is confuse the audience, and that's all they did in WCW. They confused people by saying, this is real. Okay, but then what's everything else? Again, you don't see it much anymore, and I'm so glad because, well, thankfully Vince Russo is no longer part of the business besides his podcast and whoever will pay for an autograph for him, bro. But yeah, you don't see it much, and I'm glad because it's just a weird thing to do, and I don't think you should do it. Again, just as a fan who's seen it done numerous times, it just doesn't do well. I don't get it. Not my thing. Another thing I want to talk about is, I don't know if I've said that phrase a lot. I probably have, but don't actually kill a character. When you deal with professional wrestlers, when you're dealing with professional wrestlers or managers or referees, you need to get rid of a character now and again. Someone's leaving the company, or it's time to just sort of get rid of them, or if you're Muhammad Hassan, you're too good at playing a terrorist or something like a terrorist, and then real terrorists happen, and, well, you gotta go. But you can get rid of a character and sort of push them out and injure them, but don't actually do something that is meant to kill them. Because again, it's just like the pregnancy thing. No one believes that. I don't care if you're Vince McMahon. No, Vince McMahon, at the height of Mr. McMahon, is not evil enough to have someone whacked. You can have him beat up. You can have him put in a limo and driven somewhere and whatever. Vince McMahon at the height of Mr. McMahon was never going to kill somebody, and vice versa. So whether it's Vince McMahon's exploding limo or burying Paul Bearer in concrete, it takes the believability out of it right away. I don't care how much you like wrestling, but unless you're in a shower in Puerto Rico, they're not really going to kill somebody in pro wrestling. It's not going to happen. Both McMahon and Bearer miraculously came back from the explosion and being buried alive. Bearer because WWE wanted him to play a cameo, and Vince McMahon because, well, So just don't kill off a character because no one believes it. No one believes it. And the minute you take something like that, like, oh, they killed off Vince McMahon, nobody believes it. And unless your future president, Donald Trump, and actually call to make sure Vince is okay, true story, no one believes it. No one believes it. So just don't kill off a character. Get rid of them. Don't actually try and kill them because it doesn't make any sense otherwise. We're beyond those days where people thought they were actually dead. They're not. Sorry. Don't do it. And I'll finish the episode with sort of this grab bag of things that you just shouldn't do. I don't think are good ideas, things I've seen done before and things like that. I'm going to finish one off with, and I have to go back to it. I'm sorry. I have to because it's just so awful. Don't swerve just to swerve. A good swerve can serve a purpose. When an angle goes a certain way and you expect it to go some way, and then there's a good, clever swerve that takes you out of it or turns in a certain way you weren't expecting, that can be really good. A good example is Tatanka joining the $1 Million Corporation instead of Lex Luger. Very good example. The building was weeks and weeks and weeks of Tatanka blaming Lex Luger, saying he's going to join the $1 Million Corporation back when that meant something, and he was going to join Ted DiBiase. And weeks and weeks and weeks, and there were these things like these misunderstandings among them, like something would happen, and it looked like Luger had turned on somebody or whatever, and it didn't. And then when the time came when you think Luger is actually going to do it, and you were convinced, maybe he's right, maybe Luger is going to join, Tatanka turns. Tatanka sells out and joins the $1 Million Corporation. It was a swerve, but it was a good swerve. But a swerve just for the sake of it, just to surprise people for no reason, or pulling a Russo, is just a horrible idea. Aces and Eights being led by Bully Ray for months and months and months and months. Did I say months? There's this Aces and Eights angle. These bikers, the masked bikers, who, by the way, it took forever to get the first guy unmasked, and it was being Devon. No offense to Devon, but not exactly a high-level guy, mid-card at best. Months and months and months, and then Bully Ray becomes the big defender of TNA. He stands up and he tells Hulk Hogan he's going to defend TNA, and he marries Hulk Hogan's daughter, Brooke. Even in storyline, you poor bastard. And he's going to do this. And then it turns out there's this leader, this mystery leader of the Aces and Eights, and it ends up being Bully Ray. Now, it was a swerve, but when you look at it, when you watch the whole thing again, and then you watch Bully Ray become the leader, it just doesn't make any sense. Not that the angle made a lot of sense, but Bully Ray being the heavyweight, being the guy in charge all along makes no sense. It was a swerve for the sake of it. Or then there was the higher power. It's the same scenario, really. The higher power, this higher power that was commanding the Undertaker, and he was even more evil than the Undertaker, and the corporation and the Ministry of Darkness, and then there was the corporate ministry, and they kicked Vince McMahon out of the corporate ministry, or of the corporation, because Shane McMahon got power hungry, and I wonder where that came from. And this whole thing of Vince McMahon joining the Union, which is hilarious, and even allying with Steve Austin to save Stephanie, and then when it comes down to it, the higher power is Vince McMahon. Again, it was a swerve, but what? If you look at it, it makes no sense. You're like, what? All along, the guy had the Undertaker kidnap his own daughter, get her teddy bear, set it on fire. He had the flaming teddy bear in his hands. He's crying. He has the Undertaker kidnap his daughter, try to have a black wedding with her. Steve Austin saves her. He gets kicked out of the corporation. The corporation joins with the ministry. During this, Vince McMahon himself gets roughed up more than a few times. He gets kicked out of his own corporation. He joins up with the Union and all of this stuff. And the whole plan was to have the Undertaker beat Steve Austin for the WWF title. That was it. That was the whole plan. That was all of this convoluted up and down kidnapping and attempted murder and all kinds of felonies to get the title off of Steve Austin. That's okay. Again, it was a swerve at the end that just didn't make any sense, but it was done because, well, they just decided to do it. So, I don't know. The last example of this just swerving for the sake of it is Vince McMahon's illegitimate child being Hornswoggle. Again, They just did it to do it. I mean, the original plan, as I understood it, was to have Mr. Kennedy be the guy, and then of course being, you know, him being who Kennedy was, he got busted for you know, he got in trouble and screwed himself, not literally but figuratively, and got suspended. And then when he got suspended, they took the angle from him, which was supposed to be this long-term angle running with him and leading to him and Triple H, and he's gonna be the illegitimate child and power of the company. So instead of waiting a little bit and having Kennedy do it again, or, you know, do it anyway, or just scrap the angle entirely, they went, no, let's do it. Let's just put Hornswoggle on it. So then it became a comedy show. And then it was just week after week of comedy where Vince McMahon tormented a little person for no real reason. Again, what was the payoff there? Well, I'll tell you what the payoff was. The payoff was the first match at WrestleMania in which Bradshaw faced Finlay after Bradshaw used his deductive reasoning to ask Finlay if Hornswoggle was really his son, to which Finlay went, yeah, and that was it. I'm not kidding. He literally, when they had done the angle, when they were done with the angle, they just went, JBL went, well, it's not Vince McMahon's son, it's yours. And he went, yeah, you're right. And then it led to like a hardcore match, I guess, between the two, which was the first match of WrestleMania that year, and then the angle was dropped, and that was it. And Hornswoggle would do a couple other dumb things. No offense to the guy, hey, you make your money. Dude, I'm not the guy himself. Make your money. He did really well for himself, and I don't begrudge him one bit, but it was, you have to admit, whenever they were just didn't know what to do, and they sort of like had a dumb idea, they just went, let's give it to Hornswoggle. Who's the anonymous Raw GM? I don't know, Hornswoggle. Last Cruiserweight Champion, Hornswoggle. Who's gonna make Chavo Guerrero look like a punk? Hornswoggle. Who's gonna make Carlito literally run into a wall because it was painted like a tunnel, like in Roadrunner? Hornswoggle. It was just sort of this Mad Lib of crap. So, don't do that. Don't just swerve to swerve. Don't just do it to do it, I guess will be the thing on this. And again, yeah, just don't. I don't know. That's going to be about it for this time. I mean, this is sort of a topic I just sort of came up with. I don't know why I thought of it. I think it's because I've been watching WCW in 2000, and there's a lot of, hey, why did we do that type of thing? Or why did they do that? I didn't do it. Don't blame me. Yeah, I just looked at it and went like, wow, that was awful. Why did they do that? And that's where it came up with these idea of things that you just shouldn't do. And again, as a wrestling fan, who's someone who's seen it, I get it. I get that they try to do different things, but yeah, maybe some things we've done numerous times. Don't do it again because it doesn't work, and it's never worked. So that's all. If you're in the Lima area, August 3rd, I'll be at Beans on Parade at Art Space Lima. We have 2 shows. I'm pretty sure they're both sold out, so I don't know if you're local, I'm not sure you'd be able to come to it. We might have a couple tickets available. I don't know. Check out Beans on Parade for that on Facebook, and headlined by Josh Adams, who's a very funny guy, and it's going to be a great show. But that's it for me. Yeah, check us out at facebook.com/Exploder Podcast. Check us out on Stitcher, Bandcamp, I think. I have WordPress.explodersite.com. Check us out there. That's the official blog. I'm going to put these links below. So until next time, my name's Dan. This is Exploder. Have a good one.